It felt good to shoot him. Those words came out of this defendant's mouth. 31-year-old Otis McKane.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to counsel approaching the defendant.
Overruled.
Those words, "It felt good to shoot him," came out of this defendant's mouth when he was being patted down at the Magistrate's Office Detention Center after he was arrested for the capital murder of San Antonio police officer Benjamin Markham. The him that this defendant is referring to is Officer Benjamin Markham. Benjamin Marconi was 50 years old. He was a father. He was a new grandfather to his 6-month-old grandson Mason. He was a brother. He was an uncle. He was a friend. And he was a dedicated police officer working in the San Antonio Police Department for over 20 years. Detective Marconi graduated from the police academy in 1996, in January of 1996, and he patrolled the streets of San Antonio for many years until he became a detective investigator. At the time of his death, he was working in the Special Victims Unit, which at that time he was investigating domestic violence cases. His life quickly and abruptly and tragically came to an end on November 20th of 2016. Detective Marconi was driving a marked SAPD police car. He was wearing his police uniform, and he had made a traffic stop in front of police headquarters. At this time, while he was sitting in his car, this defendant came up from behind him and shot him twice in the head. Detective Marconi never even saw it coming. He didn't even have a chance to react. You will hear evidence that Detective Marconi started his shift that morning around 6:19 a.m. He got into his patrol car. He checked the signals to make sure the car was working, the electrical lights, did a safety check on the vehicle. And then he pulled out onto the streets of San Antonio. At that point, he had 6 hours and 3 minutes left to live. You'll hear that about an hour or so, hour and a half or so later, that this defendant, Otis Tyrone McKane, comes up to police headquarters. You'll see video of that. You'll see the defendant. You'll see the vehicle. It's a black Mitsubishi with distinct aftermarket rims. Make a lap around the police department. The police department is located at 315 South Santa Rosa, just 2 blocks from here. And they have cameras on the outside of the police headquarters. And you'll first see the defendant's vehicle around 7:41 a.m. And he makes a lap. You'll see him on Urban Loop, which is the street directly behind police headquarters. He makes a lap around, full circle around police headquarters, and ends up parking in the Bill Miller's parking lot, which is directly behind. It's an employee parking lot, which is directly behind the headquarters. He gets out of his vehicle and he approaches the doors of the police department. You'll hear from Kevin Wilkinson. Kevin Wilkinson is a service agent who works for the San Antonio Police Department. He is working the information desk, and you'll see pictures of that information desk, but he's working there, and the defendant comes to the buzzer and pushes the buzzer and wants to come in. Kevin asks the defendant what he wants, or what, can I help you? And the defendant says, I want to make a visitation violation report. So Kevin Wilkinson buzzes him, lets him in, and the defendant comes up to the information desk where Kevin is working. Kevin says to him, how can I help you? And the defendant says, and this is around 7:48 a.m. that morning, November 20th, 2016, and the defendant says, I want to make a visitation report because I haven't seen my kid in a while. So Kevin asked the defendant, have you made reports in the past? And he said, yes, I've made a couple, but a few years ago. So at this point, it's now 7:49 a.m. Kevin calls upstairs to see about having someone come down to make a report. So come down to take the defendant's report. At that point, no one answers. Kevin tells the defendant, come back, we can wait, or I can help you. And the defendant says, he just says no one answers. And the defendant says, well, I'll come back later. He says, I'll come back next week. So Kevin will tell you, I think that's odd for someone to come downtown to make a report, and then as soon as I tell him no one answers, that he's ready to go. He said he didn't seem upset, but he seemed like he was in a rush, is Kevin's impression. So the defendant leaves around 7:50 a.m. He exits police headquarters and walks to the Bill Miller parking lot, gets in the black Mitsubishi. You can see the rims. The distinct rims are what you notice about the vehicle. And he leaves. He leaves downtown. He kind of takes a turn, goes in front of Nueva Street, down Santa Rosa, and he's off camera. At this time, Detective Marconi has 4 hours and 29 minutes left to live. You'll hear that at 11:33 a.m., Ricky Martinez, who's driving a Pontiac Firebird, gets pulled over for a traffic violation by Detective Marconi. Inside the vehicle with Ricky is his girlfriend, his older daughter, and his girlfriend's 2 small children. Ricky gets pulled over on Santa Rosa, and Ricky ends up pulling up in front of the police headquarters, kind of right by the entrance to the flat parking lot that belongs to the San Antonio Police Department. Detective Marconi pulls up behind him and gets out and walks over to Ricky and asks Ricky for his driver's license and insurance. Ricky hands him his driver's license, and he tells him his insurance is in the mail. Detective Marconi then goes back to the patrol car and begins running Ricky on his MDT, his mobile data terminal, right in front of him. Ricky will tell you, as he's sitting in his patrol car, as he's sitting in his car, his Pontiac Firebird, he sees a black car pull up right behind the patrol car. He's looking in his rearview mirror when he sees this. Ricky turns away and he hears 2 shots. Ricky's scared. He gets down. He then sees the individual, tall male, run back to his car. And as Ricky's, not sure what to do or what's happening, he then sees the black car turn right in front of him. Now, Ricky's parked kind of blocking one of the lanes to the entrance of the parking lot. The parking lot has these traffic arms. So as Ricky's kind of squatting down, the black car that he's just described goes right in front of him, cuts through the parking lot, busts through one of the traffic arms. The arm goes over his car and then down the back windshield, and the black Mitsubishi Galant takes off across the parking lot, takes a right, exits out of the other arm, and again busts through the arm, so the traffic arm goes up, onto the windshield, over the car, and down. And the vehicle takes off. Ricky says he gets out of his car. He goes over to the officer and asks Detective Marconi if he's okay. And Detective Marconi cannot respond. He sees blood on the officer's head and neck area. Ricky moves his car. You'll see on the video as well, he moves his car just around in case, he doesn't know what to do, but he moves his car just a slight kind of curve. And you'll see that as well. He waits for the police, he cooperates with the police, and you'll hear from Ricky in court. There will be other witnesses that will come in and testify about what they saw. You'll hear from Alexandria and Jennifer Patterson. It's a mother and a daughter. They're from Luling. They were here in San Antonio celebrating Jennifer's mother's birthday, which is Alexandria's grandmother's birthday. And they were staying at the Doubletree Hotel, which is right on the other side of 35. And they'll tell you Jennifer was driving. The mother was driving. The daughter, who's grown, was in the front passenger seat. They were driving down Cesar Chavez, and they are at the light at South Santa Rosa and Cesar Chavez. They're on their way to meet family at Mi Tierra's restaurant. As they're sitting at the light, they look over and they see a patrol car that had pulled over another vehicle. As they turn to go north on Santa Rosa, and when they're parallel to Detective Marconi's car, they see an individual get out of a black car and run over to Detective Marconi's vehicle. They'll tell you they heard shots, and Alexandria tells her mom, what the hell? They're in shock. Like, what did they just see? What the heck? Alexandria will tell you that she got a good look at the shooter. The shooter then runs, gets back in his vehicle, the black car, and takes off. They then drive straight, make a U-turn, and come back to the scene. You'll hear from Juan and Ciso. Juan drives a Via bus for the city of San Antonio. Juan is driving a group of Lackland Air Force Base recruits from Lackland Air Force Base to the USO, which is downtown across from the Briscoe Museum. He'll tell you, and you'll see on the video, you'll have an opportunity to see this, that he is when you look at the video, the video is at the corner of Cesar Chavez and Santa Rosa. As they're turning, you can see the Via bus. In front of the Via bus, closest to the police station, you can see the Cadillac that the Pattersons were in, and then you'll see the Via bus. But it's a 2-lane turn as they turn from Cesar Chavez to drive north on Santa Rosa. So Juan and Ciso will tell you that as he's driving by, again, he sees, and the witnesses, a lot of them see and you'll hear that from their testimony, the black car pull up, a black man gets out of the car, approaches the officer's car. He'll tell you he heard shots. He never saw a gun. However, Alexandria Patterson did see the gun in the defendant's hand. Juan will tell you after he heard the shots and saw the individual run back to his car, Juan keeps driving. He notifies his dispatch, that what he just saw, and he tells them, "I just saw an officer get shot." He marks his Via camera because he has a camera on the Via bus, but unfortunately, you'll hear that the camera malfunctioned. So we can't bring that to you. It didn't work, so we never had that video. Juan doesn't see him with a gun. Juan is brought back. An individual comes and takes his bus, and he's brought back to the police station to give a statement. You'll hear from Mike Flores. Mike Flores had just gotten into the Army. He's from San Antonio. And he took a drive. He was getting ready to leave to go to basic training. and he took a drive in downtown San Antonio. He was driving his red Dodge Challenger. He was in the left lane, and he'll tell you, when you look at the video, he appears to be behind the Pattersons at that light on Cesar Chavez, taking a left onto Santa Rosa. So he again sees the police car pulling over, has pulled over another, pulled over the red Firebird. And as he's driving by, he has his windows down. He stops when he sees the individual running. He thinks that he knows, like, this kind of draws his suspicion because he knows that officers don't like other people pulling in behind them. So he stops his car and he sees the individual get out, run over to the police car, and he hears 2 shots. He says he sees the gun in the shooter's left hand. The shooter then gets back in his car, takes off. Mike Flores immediately makes a U-turn and pulls up right behind the patrol car where Detective Marconi had just been shot. Mike gets out. He approaches the car and sees Detective Marconi with blood on him. He sees another officer running towards Detective Marconi's vehicle, and he's calling out, talking on his walkie. Mike Flores describes the shooter's vehicle. He says it's a black car. He describes it as either a Nissan or a Maxima with these black rims. He said he got a good look at the shooter, and he believed he would be able to identify him if he was shown a photo lineup. You'll hear from Alejandro Limon. Alejandro Limon is not from San Antonio. He had come to the La Quinta off of Dolorosa to meet his wife. He was working kind of out in the fields. His wife was from the valley, so they met here for the night. Alejandro Limon will tell you that he left. He left San Antonio to go back to work that Sunday morning, and he realizes he left his laptop at the La Quinta. So he comes back to the La Quinta to pick up his laptop. Alejandro Limon is driving a black pickup truck. And I tell you what cars they're driving, so you'll be able to see them when you watch the videos. Okay? So you'll be able to recognize who's in what car and what role they had or what they were able to see. So Alejandro Limon now is driving south on Santa Rosa, and he stopped at the light at Nueva in Santa Rosa. Okay. The police station is at that corner of Nueva. So if you look at the police station, in order to kind of fully understand, and you'll see a map later too, but the police station is at the corner of Nueva, Santa Rosa, Cesar Chavez, and Urban Loop. It's a rectangular plot of land, so to speak. Okay? So Alejandro Limon is at the light at Nueva, and he stopped at the light. He'll tell you that he sees a black 4-door sedan who's driving north. He's north on Santa Rosa, make a U-turn in front of him, and pull up right behind the officer's vehicle. He's still at the light, and he sees at this point, he's thinking at this point that the individual is maybe an undercover detective or something. He doesn't at this time think anything of it. He's on his way out of town. And so so as he's at the light turns, he sees the individual get out of the black car, approach the police car, and run back and get into the black car. He drives towards the black sedan, and he doesn't see a gun, nor does he hear the shooting, but he sees the individual kind of running back with his hands down by his midsection, his crotch area is how he describes it. So at this point, Alejandro Limon is going to drive south until he sees the vehicle cut through the police parking lot, and he thinks there's something odd about that. So he ends up following that vehicle. He doesn't follow him through the parking lot because there's traffic arms there. But he goes straight, takes a right on Cesar Chavez, takes another right on Urban Loop, and then he sees the black Mitsubishi exit the police parking lot, go up to Nueva, take a left, head towards 35, and then take another left on the access road. All right. Alejandro Limon then comes back to the scene. He goes up to the police car. He sees several people at the police car and taking the officer out. The officer has blood, and this officer obviously is Benjamin Marconi, has blood, all over his head and neck area, and he sees the officers attempting to give him first aid. He makes the determination, or has the belief now that that individual that he saw, although he didn't see or hear a gun shot, must have shot the officer. So he stays, he cooperates with the police, and gives a statement. You'll hear from a SWAT officer by the name of Chris Zigmont. He was walking out of police headquarters on the side entrance into the parking lot to get into his car when he sees the black Mitsubishi with these aftermarket rims bust through he hears a noise, a screech sound, and drive erratically through the parking lot. At this point, he looks over to the left, and he sees that a car had been pulled over on a traffic stop, and he sees a San Antonio police car. He looks at the individual's face, which is Ricky Martinez, and he sees something's wrong. So he rushes over to the police car and sees that an officer has been shot. He immediately gets on his walkie-talkie and calls his radio and calls for backup. You'll hear from Mark Bissett. Mark Bissett was here with his girlfriend and young sons on a race. His girlfriend was doing some sort of athletic event. And they were on Cesar Chavez, kind of further down, and he sees what happens. And Mark Bissett is a Army Green Beret with training, highly specialized medical training. So as soon as he hears this, he runs over and comes to the aid of Benjamin Marconi. EMS, and Detective Marconi, you'll know from the video, was shot at 11:38 a.m. by this defendant. You'll know that EMS arrives. They are dispatched at 11:43. They're not too far downtown. They're dropping someone off at the Nix Hospital downtown. So they arrive at the scene at 11:45. They're here quickly, in 2 minutes. The other officers assist getting Detective Marconi onto a stretcher and putting him in the EMS unit. When the paramedics arrive, they see Benjamin Marconi, Officer Marconi, on his side. Blood is coming out of his mouth, and a SWAT officer is holding pressure to the back of his head. He's quickly put on a stretcher, put into the ambulance. Officer Art Lopez, who had arrived to the scene, jumps in the back of the ambulance to be with Detective Marconi as he's taken to SAMC, San Antonio Military Medical Center. Inside the ambulance, chest compressions are started right away. Blood is coming out. They're having a tough time controlling the blood, so they have to aspirate him. They gave him IV. The IV comes out. They are giving him epinephrine to keep his heart and his blood pressure going. They're losing Ben Marconi's losing his pulse. Things are happening fast. They continue. They take turns giving CPR, and they keep suctioning the blood. There's blood all over the ambulance. And they quickly get to SAMC. But at the time that Detective Marconi arrives at SAMC, his condition is worse. And he's listed as having, what they call pulseless electrical activity. So no pulse. He's rushed into SAMC. You'll hear from two doctors at SAMC. One is the trauma surgeon, and the other is an emergency medicine doctor. Benjamin Marconi is rushed into Bay 1. They receive news from EMS, the doctors do, as he's on his way in. They say, we have an officer that's shot in the head, and he's in bad condition. They assembled this team of doctors, from trauma surgeons to anesthesiologists to emergency medical doctors. They call neurologists, neurosurgeons down there. They know, they've been given word that Detective Marconi has been shot in the head. So as soon as he's brought in, they get to work. And right before they come in, Detective Valerie Sands, who is the trauma surgeon there, she tells her team of doctors, this is going to be a full court press. We're going to do everything we can to save this officer's life. Again, they are having trouble controlling the bleeding. Blood is coming out of his nose, his mouth. They're suctioning him constantly. They're giving him blood. They end up giving him 4 units of blood. They give him epinephrine. They are trying to get his heart pumping again. They have to do an emergency thoracotomy, which is where they cut open his side and put a rib spreader so that they can massage his heart to get it to pump again. Despite all of these heroic efforts, at 12:22 p.m., Dr. Erica Simon pronounces Detective Benjamin Marconi deceased. You'll hear at that time there's a San Antonio police officer, Art Lopez, and Dr. Simons will tell you that he fell to the ground and he let out a large wail. You'll hear from Dr. Jennifer Roulant. She's from the Bexar County Medical Examiner Office, and she conducted the autopsy on Benjamin Marconi. She will tell you that he had 2 gunshot wounds to the head. The first gunshot wound is on his left cheek, right by his nostril, and it exits right below his right ear. That the bullet perforated his tongue, his mandible, and exited his neck. She'll tell you that there's evidence of close-range firing and that there's powder tattooing from the firearm on his cheek and on his left cheek and left eye. She'll tell you that the path of the bullet is front to back, left to right, and downward. She will describe to you the second gunshot wound of Benjamin Marconi. Benjamin Marconi was shot the second time in the back of the head, right here, and it exited out of the top of his skull. During autopsy, they found a small projectile, a small piece of a projectile right inside the base of his skull in the skin. So the bullet broke off as it went in through his head, a small piece. She'll tell you that there's evidence of close-range firing as well, that there's soot deposited near the wound. The path of the bullet was back to front, left to right, and upward. And the manner of death was ruled a homicide. So the investigation begins immediately, right when word comes up that Detective Marconi has been murdered. Police officers run out of the police station. They take witnesses up, any witnesses that are there, and they take them upstairs to get their statements. At this point, they don't know who did this horrific act in front of police headquarters. The first thing that needs to be done is we need to, this is from the officers, and you'll hear one of the first things that needs to be done is to preserve the video, any kind of video. In the patrol car that Detective Marconi is driving, there was a Coban video, okay, and it's called Coban's the company, but it's a video in the front of the vehicle on the grate. So you'll be able to see the traffic stop with Ricky. You'll be able to see Detective Marconi get out and talk to Ricky. You'll be able to see the last moments of his life on video. There's also another camera inside Detective Marconi's patrol car. It's positioned in the back passenger area, back passenger above the passenger door. And so from that camera, you can see what happened inside that patrol car. The camera has a toggle switch, and the toggle switch somehow was, at some point, had been switched. So the first time you see it, it appears to be in reverse. So so it's a little confusing the first time you see the original because of the toggle switch. It appears that Detective Marconi is sitting in the passenger seat, which he's not. And so I'm telling you this because that video was then taken to a San Antonio police investigator in the video investigations unit, and he performed a process where they're able to do a 180 because of that toggle switch, to put it in the exact way it would have happened. Okay. And you'll be able to see both. You'll be able to see the first one and the second one. We'll obviously bring both to you. And when you watch that video, you'll be able to see Detective Marconi in his last minutes and last seconds of his life. And you'll see the first time he shot, you don't see the gun, but you see a figure come in the back passenger window. You can kind of see a figure with a hat. And you can see kind of Detective Marconi's right shoulder. And right after he shot the first time, and we know the sequence of the shots based on that interior camera video. That Detective Marconi, the first time, was shot in the cheek, and the bullet exits, as I said, from his neck. And at that point, Detective Marconi puts his hand on his face, and he leans over just slightly. And then you'll see a hand come in. A hand come in right up onto Detective Marconi's, the back of his head, and you'll see that gun being fired. And Detective Marconi, after that second shot, slumps over into the passenger seat. You'll hear from another employee of the San Antonio Police Department, Eric Jimenez. And Eric Jimenez's job was to pull the video cameras from the police department of the actual shooting. There's what's called a parapet camera that's over the high up video that shows the Detective Marconi's car, Ricky Martinez's car that he had pulled over in the traffic stop. It shows the defendant's car. It shows the other vehicles that arrived afterwards. And so Eric Martinez pulled the various videos. And you'll hear from Eric. When crime scene investigators came to the scene, right away, immediately they were called out. There were 2 shell casings that were collected. One of them was found in the back seat of the patrol vehicle. And you can see the actual, if you watch it in slow motion, you can see the actual shell casing go into the back seat or go backwards. And a second shell casing was found on the ground, right outside the driver's side of the patrol car. You'll hear that 2 bullets were recovered. One of them is found in the passenger floorboard of the police vehicle. and the other one is found embedded in the front passenger seat, kind of on the right side of the seat. And you can see the indentation of where the bullet went in. The traffic arms, in addition to other evidence that's collected, this is the two traffic arms, the one that the defendant drove through on the Santa Rosa side and the one that he drove out of from the parking lot on the Urban Loop sign. Both of those traffic arms were collected. You'll hear from David Pendleton, the firearms expert, and he'll tell you he did a comparison of the shell casings and the two shell casings that were collected from the scene, that they were fired in the same firearm. He'll tell you that the types of firearms that fired these types of shell casings, they're .40 caliber shell casings, are Smith & Wesson and also Glock. The bullets, based on they're not able to do a comparison of the bullets to see if they were fired, but the two fired from the same firearm, but the two shell casings were. A command post is set up in the third floor of the San Antonio Police Headquarters, and you'll hear from Lieutenant Bell, and he'll tell you that they had briefings every hour on the hour about the investigation. Tips are being followed. This becomes both a multi-unit state and federal investigation. The FBI is present, ATF comes, Homeland Security, DPS, Bexar County Sheriff's, and obviously San Antonio Police Department. They're following any leads people are calling. I think I saw a black car here. Here's the distinct rims. Calls are being made. Officers are sent out to follow any kind of leads. A decision was made to release some still photos from that day, photos of the vehicle, and also of the suspect who had come to police headquarters that morning and spoke to Kevin Wilkinson. And Kevin will tell you right afterwards, right after he hears, like different people were saying, different witnesses were saying that the shooter was wearing a black hoodie. And so when Kevin hears that, he's still at work inside at the information desk. After the shooting, he runs outside and he hears that and he tells detectives, hey, there was a man this morning that was wearing a black hoodie that came to the police department, and he wanted to make a report for a visitation violation. So then they pulled those cameras too, those videos that show the individual walking in. And you'll hear that individual is Otis McKane. And you'll hear that from the mouth of Otis McKane. So the photo of the individual, Otis McKane, who walked into police headquarters around 7:48 a.m. was released. The pictures of the black Mitsubishi with the aftermarket rims who had plowed through the police parking lot, those photos were released. And so police are getting tips. One of the tips they get is an individual, a name's given that it could be this individual named Lorenzo Calvin. Police go out, they locate Lorenzo Calvin. Later that evening, they bring him in. They question him. He denies any kind of involvement. He then says, during his statement, he was at work. He works at a dog or an animal daycare place. And so detectives call the owner. They speak to other employees. They learn that he doesn't own a car. He takes Uber. And so based on the alibi and confirming those alibis, they let 21-year-old Lorenzo Calvin go. They are satisfied that he is not involved in the capital murder. The police are not looking to just pick up anyone to solve this case. They're looking for the killer of Detective Markham. So all through the night, police officers are working. They're all over the city looking for that vehicle. But before that, you'll hear that Sunday night at 6:22 p.m., this defendant, mind you, lives on Lombrano, on the west side of San Antonio. He and his girlfriend, Christian Fields, she lives in the next unit over, that they go to the Econo Lodge and they rent a room that night. They rent a room at the Econo Lodge. It's off 35 north of 410. And they rent the room for 2 nights. It's defendant, Christian Fields, and Christian Fields' 2-year-old child, Bailey. So they rent the room. They're there in the room. They're hanging out. They're ordering pizza. And you'll see the video. You'll see the video from the Econo Lodge of them arriving. You'll see later on the search of the room when it's discovered that he and Christian Fields had been there. Okay. So all through the night, the police are out looking. They're trying to follow any leads. They're trying to find the black Mitsubishi. At 9:15 a.m. the following morning, Monday, November 21st of 2016, there's a motor vehicle accident on the intersection of Poplar and Calaveras, which is on the west side of San Antonio. So officers are dispatched to that location. They arrive around 9:25 or so, and as they're there, they're talking to the people that have been involved in the accident. A second patrol car comes as a follow-up car. And you'll learn, too, that after Detective Marconi was murdered, that the policy comes out, because this individual is still out there, that all officers have to double up. An officer cannot be alone now in a police car. So a second set of officers arrive at the motor vehicle crash site. When they're told that they're not needed, that the other officers have the crash under control or their investigation under control, you'll hear from Officer Marco Ortiz. And he'll tell you that they're driving now south on Calaveras, right past the intersection at Poplar. And he's in the passenger seat. Officer Henderson's in the front seat. And as they're driving by, Officer Ortiz looks over and sees a black Mitsubishi Galant with the aftermarket rims that looks exactly like the car that he had seen on the video and those pictures that were sent out to look for. He gets out, and on the car he sees paint scrapings on the hood, on the windshield, on the back windshield of this car. He calls it in to his office, gives the license plate, and it's confirmed that the car belongs to Otis Tyrone McKane at 1236 Lombrano Street. At that time, an individual who lives there's a home right there at the corner. There's several homes, one on each corner, but an individual who lives at 1949 West Poplar, at the corner of Poplar and Calaveras. During the wreck, he comes out and he tells the officers, I have video cameras outside my house. You may want to look at my video cameras to see the wreck. So after the officers discovered the defendant's vehicle, just right past that intersection on Calaveras, they asked him, do you think you have video cameras of when, or how far does your video go back? Do you think you'll have video of when this car was parked here? And Guillermo says yes. So they go in, the San Antonio Video Investigations team comes in, they view the video. And what you'll see is, this defendant, Otis McKane, within 3 hours of having shot Detective Marconi twice in the head, parking his car there and leaving it there. He parks it there at 2:33 p.m. on November 20th of 2016. So just shy of 3 hours from the 11:38 a.m. when Detective Marconi was shot. You'll see the defendant get out of the vehicle. He kind of hunches down by the trunk for a little while. And then he gets up. He's carrying these rubber boots, or these boots that appear to be rubber. At the time, you can't really tell, but these boots, he's carrying them as he's walking north on Calaveras, crossing over Poplar. And when he gets to the intersection of Poplar and Calaveras, you'll see on the video that he looks up to look at the street sign, as if looking, okay, where did I park my car? He stops, looks up, and then keeps going north on Calaveras. And he comes out of view of the video camera at 2 12:37 p.m. You'll hear from Christina Vachon, who works at the Bexar County Crime Lab. And she'll tell you that she examined the two traffic arms that were submitted to her, one from the Santa Rosa side and one from the Urban Loop side, the two traffic arms that the defendant had driven through in his black Mitsubishi Galant. And paint scrapings were taken by CSI investigators and submitted to the crime lab. She'll tell you that the paint on both the front windshield and the back windshield had the same physical and chemical characteristics as the two arms, the two traffic arms. And those paint scrapings were taken from the front windshield and back windshield of this defendant's Mitsubishi Galant. She'll tell you that the paint on top, however it ended there on the roof, does not match either arm. You'll hear that somewhere around 9:45, 9:50 on Monday morning, November 21st of 2016, so not even 24 hours after this defendant shot and killed Detective Marconi, that he and his girlfriend, Christian Fields, are in this building. They're here getting married. They come into the Paul Elizondo Tower. On the Nueva side, you'll see them go through security. You'll see them get their marriage license. And they get married in a courtroom, just like one of these, that morning. And they leave here around 10:28, 10:25 or so, Monday morning. So while they're here getting married, while the defendant and Christian Fields are here getting their marriage license and getting married, a call comes to the San Antonio Police Department, 911, from a man named Joseph Hinojosa. Joseph Hinojosa works for Rent-A-Tire. The defendant, on September the 6th of 2016, had gone to the Rent-A-Tire at 813 Bandera Road. He had gone there to get new rims, these fancy black and chrome rims, put on his Mitsubishi, and also new tires. The defendant, they knew the defendant. It's Joseph Hinojosa, Mike Garcia, and Justin Rodriguez, the individuals from Rent-A-Tire. And they're calling, telling Joseph Hinojosa specifically, is calling the police at 8:23 a.m. the next morning, Monday, November 21st, saying, I recognize the car and the guy that y'all are showing on the video. The guy is Otis McKane. And the video, and this is the man who, the pictures that are put out for the public to see are the pictures of the man who came in to police headquarters that morning to make the visitation violation report. And the pictures of the vehicle that are put out are the pictures of the Mitsubishi busting through the arms in the police parking lot. And he says, I know that man. He says, he comes in here every week to make payments on his rims. The rims are somewhere around $1,300, $1,400 that he makes these weekly payments on. They said he always wears his Spurs hat and usually wears black. So they give the police at that time, so at 8:23 a.m., Officer Marco Ortiz had already found the vehicle somewhere after 9:25 when SAPD arrived at the scene. But Joseph Hinojosa is telling the police it's Otis McKane in these pictures. He drives a 2011 Mitsubishi Galant. Here's the license plate, here's his date of birth, and this is where he lives, 1236 Lombrana. At that point, police officers put together a photo lineup. It's a total of 6 pictures with 2 blanks, and they go over to the home. The homicide detectives go over to the home of Mike Flores. Mike Flores is the one who's driving the red Dodge Challenger, who parked right behind. He's the one who stopped and observed it happening and said in his statement, I can identify it. It's shown in picture. So they go to his house. They show him a photo lineup. The officer who shows it to him is not involved in the investigation at all. So it's what's called a blind administrator. He didn't put the photo lineup together, nor was he involved in the investigation. And you'll hear from Detective Sines that he showed Mike Flores the photo lineup, and Mike Flores picked out the defendant and photo number 3 and said, Mike Flores' words were, "This is the person I saw shooting the officer." An arrest warrant was signed by a judge at 2:20 p.m. that same day, Monday, November 21st, 2016. Surveillance is set up. You'll hear that a covert surveillance units were set up all over town looking for the defendant. They were outside looking to see if he returned to get his gallant. They have undercover officers watching that in case he came back to pick up his car. His car has been there since he dropped it off. Instead of parking it in front of his house, which is about about a half a mile to 3/4 of a mile away in Lombrano in the Lincoln Courts, he leaves it at Calaveras and Poplar. So it's still there 24 hours later. Officers are still watching it to see if he returns to get it. They go to other relatives' houses to see if he returns then, there. And they're parked outside looking in undercover units just in case he returns. They at one point you'll see that you'll hear from Danny Martinez. He's a detective, and he was doing undercover surveillance at the defendant's residence. And he'll tell you that he was parked kind of down the street, but he had an eye on the house, and that a white Buick pulls up, and that a female gets out, goes into her apartment, which is one building over, gets some bags, gets back in the car, and he sees someone in the front passenger seat that has the seat leaned back. So he can tell it's someone, but he can't identify or see who the person is. So the car gets put under surveillance. Eventually, the car is stopped. And you'll see a video of it. You'll see a video from the DPS airplane that was above as they're conducting surveillance on this car. The car pulls up. The defendant's in the car with Christian Fields and Christian Fields' 2-year-old child. They are going to go to Houston to drop off, or to head to, they're meeting Christian Fields' mom halfway between Houston and San Antonio and Schulenburg. Okay, that's where they're headed. At some point, you'll see them stop at this gas station. That's a gas station fast food restaurant, Church's Chicken, near I-10 and 1560. They park there. At one point, the defendant gets out, goes inside, gets out of the passenger seat, goes inside, gets in the driver's seat. Again, this is Christian Fields' white Buick. And then she gets out. She goes in and comes back and gets in the passenger side. As they drive and go under an overpass, you'll see on video all of these officers converge on the white Buick. The defendant's driving. SWAT, this is conducted by SWAT officers. They are highly trained, and their job is to safely effect the arrest of the defendant without harm to him or harm to themselves. One of the SWAT officers, Daniel Elborn, throws what's called a distraction or diversion device. And they use this often in cases. You throw it over the vehicle, and it makes a bang noise, a loud noise, so that individuals who are being arrested will look, and the officers can come in and get the person arrested without harm to anyone. So that's done in this case. The defendant's removed from the driver's seat of the car, taken over to a vehicle, patted down, and placed in the back of a patrol car. He is not harmed, he is not injured, and it's all on DPS airplane video. The defendant is brought down to police headquarters to speak to a homicide detective. The SWAT officers will tell you as they exited the freeway, they drive by the front of the police department, the public safety headquarters on South Santa Rosa. And as they're driving by the spot where Detective Marconi was murdered, The defendant turns and looks and gazes at that spot. He turns back, they then bring him in, and they take him upstairs to be interviewed by Detective Duke. After the interview, and I'm going to go into the interview in a moment, but after the interview, the defendant is walked out. He's walked out to a patrol car to be taken to the magistrate's office. And media is present around him. And it's a short walk from leaving the police department, it's inside the police department garage, to put him in the patrol car to transport him to the magistrate's office to be magistrated on the capital murder charge. A media person asks him, "What were you upset about, sir?" And the defendant says, "Society not letting me see my son, and I lashed out at somebody that didn't deserve it." These are not questions coming from police officers. These are questions coming from the media. Another media reporter says, "Did you know Officer Markham?" And the defendant responds, "No, sir." Another media reporter says, "Why was it his fault that you wouldn't see your son?" And the defendant's response was, "I've been through several custody battles, and I was upset at the situation, and I lashed out at somebody who didn't deserve it. I'm sorry. It could have been anybody." The media asked him again, a reporter, "So you were upset and just wanted to take it out on someone?" And the defendant said, "Yes, sir." And you'll see that videotape. You'll see the exchange between the questions and his answers. And it's all there for you to hear. He then is taken to the detention center, where two SWAT officers hear the defendant saying, and he's kind of just saying these, he's not directing them at anyone, he's kind of just saying them to himself, that he was glad that he shot him. "You can't judge me. It felt good doing what he did." He said that he had to do something to get someone to listen. From there, the defendant, and then he also made that statement to Officer Morris that it felt good to shoot him. As soon as Officer Morris heard that, he notified his supervisor, and he wrote a report on it. The defendant was then taken to the Bexar County Jail, and he was booked for the capital murder of Detective Markham. While he was at the jail, before, as an initial screening, they have individuals go through a mental health screening. And so he meets with a counselor by the name of Elroy Brown. And Elroy Brown will tell you about his conversation. He spoke to the defendant about 30 minutes or so. Elroy Brown is not law enforcement. And he'll tell you that in this conversation, the defendant admitted to shooting the officer. And he told Elroy he knew what he did was wrong, but felt justified in some ways. And finally, you'll hear the statement that the defendant gave to Detective Mark Duke of the San Antonio Police Department. Prior to making these other statements, Detective Duke interviewed him. The defendant was given water. He was allowed to use the restroom. He appears coherent. And he was Mirandized. His Miranda warnings were read to him. And he was asked if he understood his rights. And he said yes. And he goes on to talk. And it's a lengthy DVD video interview that you'll see. But he goes on to, Detective Duke interviewed the defendant about the capital murder case. He talks about his child issues that that the defendant has with the mother of his child. He tells Detective Duke that he is $8,000 in arrears on child support. And you'll see kind of the progression of lies. He lies to Detective Duke maybe 10 or 11 times before telling him that he was the one who was at police headquarters that morning. But he says at that point, but it wasn't me who shot the officer. I was just there that morning. Okay. He tells Detective Duke that he's left-handed. And you'll see when you watch the video, and the significance of that is that the hand that comes in, the defendant's hand that comes in and shoots Detective Marconi in the back of the head is being held in the defendant's left hand. You'll hear the defendant's statements about the case itself when he finally admits to doing it. He tells the police that he got rid of the gun and the clothes he was wearing so that they couldn't be traced or put back on him. He says he dumped them at some bolero off of Babcock. And of course, police searched the dumpster later on after the interview, and they don't find the gun. They're not sure which bolero. He doesn't tell them which one. He just gives a general area near a Gold's Gym off of Babcock. But the statements he makes, you'll hear. You'll hear from this defendant's mouth as he's talking to Detective Duke. He says, "I'm not trying to prove a point. I was mad. I took it out on the first person I seen because I had nothing to live for, and I wanted to fuck somebody's life up. It could have been a 21-year-old. He goes on to say, "I wanted to make the police station feel the burn that I felt in my heart." He tells Detective Duke, "I already had that in my mind because of how heinous the crime was. I thought of me beating somebody up or shooting somebody is the only thing to soothe my soul at the moment. I knew from the moment I pulled that trigger that it wasn't the right thing to do. My emotions got overran, and I took it out on the first person I seen. I want to cry and apologize to this person and their family, but something in my heart won't let me, man." You'll hear those words and more from the mouth of Otis McKane when he spoke to Detective Duke on the evening of November 21st of 2016. After all the evidence has come in and you've heard it, you will know by this defendant's actions and his words that he committed the capital murder of San Antonio Police Department Detective Benjamin Marconi by shooting him at close range twice in the head. Thank you for your time.